All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick, we're going to do a 2025 preview and prediction for the Florida Gators. Looking at the staff, Billy Napier, through 3 seasons, 500 record. Rob Sales and Russ Callaway will be the offensive coordinators. And then Rod Roberts leads a 3-headed monster here at defensive coordinator. 7th-ranked high school recruiting class, only 93rd in the portal. Only went out and got 5 guys. Great 2024 campaign, Nick. It started bumpy in September, but the rest of the way was pretty darn impressive from the Gators, ended with a Gasparilla Bowl victory. And for the 3rd straight year, Nick, I correctly predicted the Florida Gators record, so if anyone has any complaints with my analysis of Florida, I'm the most qualified one in the country, I would say, with that crowning achievement. Everything started with this offense. This is a unit I'm pretty high on. DJ Lagway, of course, last year comes in as a 5-star, splits this room with Graham Mertz. Mertz, he ended up throwing 94 balls because he was hurt most of the season. That was unfortunate, but at the same time, it allowed Lagway to get on the field. And this is a guy that was relatively good, but he also had plenty of negatives as well. Starting with the positives, this is a guy that showcases an elite arm, phenomenal strength, very good downfield accuracy. Despite the bigger size of 6'3", 239, has some good speed and moves as a runner. He has a baseball pitcher-like stroke when he throws it. Good elusiveness and calmness when the pocket breaks down. Plenty of mental lapses, though, and poor decisions versus coverage, leading to bad turnovers. He had a significant lack of efficiency, 54% comp rate in the SEC. Will he evolve into more than a gunslinger this year, Nick, is what we want to see. I want to see him evolve into a guy that can be a field general and work all avenues of the plane. Last year, when it came to throwing the ball downfield, he was phenomenal at doing so. You saw that numerous times throughout the season. But the negatives I spoke to, Nick, were clearly evident, and that's why we had him lower than most people on our top 10 quarterbacks list.
We had him lower than most people, but we're still both very high on DJ Lagway. This is a guy that I think could really develop and turn into an absolute star in college football. He has all the makings of being a star quarterback. He just has to put the puzzle pieces together. There's a lot of pieces that he has to put together, but I think he can certainly find a way to do so. Lagway is an incredibly talented quarterback who could really step up and be good for this team. We ranked him 7th on our list of quarterbacks. Some people have him in the range of 5 to 3. I think he can certainly get to the number 5, number 3 quarterback in the nation once this is all said and done. Last year, 6% comp rate was a little bit less than desirable, about 1,900 yards passing, 12 touchdowns and 9 picks. Can run a little bit, not super part of his game, but I think you can do so as a bigger quarterback. Like the arm strength, right? I think the deep ball is really solid for him. I think there's a lot of high upside here. I think the footwork was good at times last year. It was a mess occasionally, right, with Mertz playing and then getting hurt. I thought Lagway showed a lot of flash. I think he really does have a really high ceiling here. It's a boomer bust prospect. He was a high ranked recruit out of high school for a reason. I think Napier's finally got his guy though, right? There was some instability at quarterback early on in Napier's tenure. That's why this team, is 500 over his 3 seasons. But I think he's finally putting together some good things on the recruiting trail, bringing in Lagway, who got his feet wet last year. He's got a full season to work with, a full year, full offseason to work with the offensive coordinators, a full offseason to work with all the weapons. He has a really good running back room to support him as well that I think will continue to develop and blossom into some star power there. I think the sky's the limit for Lagway. This is a quarterback that I'm really high on and a guy that I think can really develop and turn into a star in the SEC.
Now let's look at some of the weapons he has at pass catcher. You start with Eugene Wilson, a guy coming into the year I thought was going to be a top 10 pass catcher due to injuries. Only ended up playing 4 games, and they still were able to showcase, an 8-5 record. This is a guy who's explosive with the ball in his hands, used on jet sweeps, plenty, really quick feet. He has a great first step, allows him to really thrive off of his release. Very effective on slants. He's using a variety of different alignments. Nearly 100 career targets, no drops, showcasing elite hands. I think Wilson at full health is going to be, again, one of the top receivers in the country. I love the addition of J. Michael Sturdivant from UCLA. That's a guy that shows good length, really covers good ground as a strider. He has physicality that allows him to create and win at the top of his routes at 6'3", 205. Good ability in that intermediate range with his speed. He must fake out moves. The ability to find creases in zone really stands out. He's also improved his drop problem. He should really start to produce here with the Gators. I love the potential of him. That's 2 veterans you can point to in this receiver group. The rest of it is a lot of high upside and guys that are going to have to, be well coached, and they're going to have to, showcase consistency for things to come full circle. Aiden Mizell enters his 3rd year and should start to be a more consistent producer. Had a few big plays last year, but far and few. Possesses great speed of a nice catch radius. Tank Hawkins, a player to watch, another certified burner. This should be dynamic in the slot. It'll come down to the staff to see how these young guys can be when it comes to being effective in other areas. High-end recruit Vernell Brown possesses great short area quickness. He's a snappy route runner. Dallas Wilson, on the other hand, was also a highly notable recruit, 6'3", 210. He's a good vertical threat, really competitive player after the catch and a willing blocker. really good room here, Nick. They have some vets at the top, while some of these young cats, if they can really evolve, this is going to be a gnarly passing attack. And of course, they get a veteran back in Khalil Jackson as well. I'm very high on this wide receiver room, but again, it's going to come down to a lot of those factors to see if they can turn out or not.
This is a good wide receiver room that can certainly develop into a great wide receiver room. I think Eugene Wilson showed a lot in the 4 games he played last year prior to injury. A kid that's got a ton of upside, was a good young asset in this wide receiving core, had 266 yards, 14 yards to grab, and 1 score during his 4 games. He's going to be really good for this team. Expect a huge step up from him. I think Sturdivant was a really good add from UCLA. Didn't have the greatest season last year, right? Only 315 yards receiving and 2 scores. Had 600 yards the year before and 4 scores, but he's a really good add from UCLA, a guy that's been around the game for a little bit. A big, agile wide receiver, 6'2", 215. A really good add, Michael Sturdivant, that is. I think he'll be really good for this offense. Want to see where he slots in, probably at that wide receiver Z position, a guy that could really be involved and be a good physical asset for this team. I think Mizell is a really good player that showed a lot of promise early on. 200 yards receiving, 11.9 yards for grab, and 2 scores for him. Solid numbers overall. And then Tank Hawkins is a really good. The speed on that kid is just absolutely phenomenal. 100 yards receiving and a touchdown for him in 8 games. He should be involved. I like what they have at tight end. 2 solid returning tight ends in Hayden Hassan and Tony Livingston. Hassan had 207 yards receiving and a score, while Livingston had 110 yards receiving and 2 scores. Expect those 2 tight ends to be involved in the offense as well. This is a really good unit. I think this has some solid depth here. TJ Abrams could potentially be involved as well. Khalil Jackson could get some reps at a wide receiver X. I like what this room can do. I think this is a really solid unit. I think Lagway will take a step forward. I think this unit will certainly help with that. A good, steady wide receiver room that can certainly turn into a great unit.
Now let's look at this rushing attack headlined by true sophomore Jaden Baugh. This guy was really impressive last year. He has really good speed despite being 6'1", 227 as a bigger back. He can really outrun linebackers to the sideline. Good agility, nice fit for the zone running scheme. Has a good feel for his blocks. Had 5 of his 7 touchdowns come against Kentucky. Had one in a blowout against Texas, and then had the game clincher against LSU. So we want to certainly see him find the end zone more this year, Nick. And I certainly think he will with increased touches. The rest of this room, Jacoby Jackson enters his 3rd year. Was a really good number 2 back. He was some nice goal line help, though. He had 7 scores. He had 100-plus rushing versus the Longhorns as well. Treon Webb only saw a few snaps due to injury, but he might be the most athletic of the bunch with his burst and ability to make defenders miss. Katie Daniels was a 4-star in last year's class as well, so this is a nice backfield for UF. They don't really have any pass-catching help, though, and I feel like that's a problem at the tight end position as well, Nick, so that's certainly something that could be one of the negatives for this Florida unit. Very far and few, though, when it comes to negatives, and this running back room has some nice versatility.
I absolutely love this running back room. I forgot how good Jaden Ball was for this team. I did my research, caught back up on it in the offseason. I was like, wow, this Ball kid is just phenomenal. I'm excited to see what he can do this year. I'm really high on him. I think he's a really incredible back that can be involved in this offense in multiple different ways. I think he can be involved a little bit as a pass catcher. Only had 4 grabs last year, including a touchdown, but I think they'll try to use him a little bit more in the pass game, which may answer one of your questions there you just posed about can anyone else step up in the passing game. Ball, 673 yards, 7 touchdowns, a really good player, about 50 yards per game on the ground. Expect him to have a huge workload, a really good back that can really step up. Jacoby Jackson is a really talented back as well, 500 yards rushing, 5.4 yards per carry, and 7 scores, about 40 yards per game for him. Expect these 2 to have similar numbers, potentially step up those numbers as well. I think Webb and Daniels are 2 solid backs, towards the bottom of the depth chart. Both of them had a touchdown, below 100 yards rushing, but I saw some solid touches in some of them, especially Daniels, who in limited touches showed some nice burst and found a way to get in the end zone during his 4 games. I want to see what Webb can do. I want to see what Daniels can do, but I do think this is a running back room that has a lot of upside. This is an offensive unit overall that I think has a lot of upside. I think Ball can really break out and be a household name come the end of the season.
Now let's look at the offensive line for the Gators. They returned 4 starters up front. Austin Barber back for his 3rd straight season starting left tackle. Has been quite good considering the talent he faces on a weekly basis. Love the potential of Kanijah Harris, 6'3", 321, really good movement. Seems to lose the initial hand fight, but recovers quickly and latches on with some nice length at left guard. Figured Damian George would, be better suited at his more natural position of guard, and he was great, not allowing a single sack. He's 6'6", 345. I think they're really going to be happy with what they have in terms of improvement at the guard positions this year. And then you have center Jake Slaughter, strong anchor, quick out of his stance. He can grip and turn defenders back inside effectively, high-end football IQ. Not really an athletic specimen by any means, so he can struggle versus stunts, 6'4", 308 pounds. And, of course, at right tackle is the only position that's going to get a makeover. Bryce Lovett played a good bit last season at 3 different positions. He's going to be, I think the starting right tackle as he shined there in the bowl game. He's 6'5", 317. They have some good experience for the second stringers, though. Devon Manuel, 6'7", he's 6'7". He's a guy that can play left tackle. Cameron Wades has versatility. Jason Zatamella was the top-ranked interior offensive lineman in last year's recruiting class. And then Roderick Kearney was also great in the bowl game, playing a lot of right guard for them at 6'4", 300. He fits a run-heavy offense well. I love this offensive line, Nick. This is a top 5 unit in CFB, and you'll see I have an A+ for this offense. And this offensive line moves the needle for me. That's why I ended up with such a high grade, the toppest that you can get when it comes to our system. Am I being unjustified here? Am I too excited, or do you think it's appropriate?
No, I love this offensive line. This is a great unit, and I think even the weakest point, which is Bryce Lovett, is still a guy that's got a ton of upside. Lovett looked phenomenal in the bowl game, the Gasparilla Bowl. He was really strong in that outfit there. Played a really great game there. That was a huge moment from him. I think he stepped up a lot in that game. A win for them, a big win for Florida Gators, and I think that he was one of the better players on the field that day at right tackle. He's going to play there, this season. He was very versatile, moving around a lot. I think he'll be really good at right tackle. Jamian George at right guard. I think that right side in general is just a very strong physical unit. I like what I see there a lot. Jake Slaughter is a phenomenal center, an underrated name in the SEC, a guy that will continue to take big steps forward. Kanaji Harris, I think, is a good left guard that has a lot of more room to grow, but still a really good player. And then Austin Barber was really solid. He continues to return at left tackle, putting in good production on that side, protecting Lagway. I think the sky's the limit for this offense. An A+ is certainly a grade that's high, and some people may look at that and scoff, but this room has so much potential. This offense has so much potential. Has a sturdy offensive line, has really good backs that I think can take a step forward, a great wide receiving room, some tight ends I think can step up, and a quarterback who could really boom and turn himself into a star. I think Billy Napier's got himself an offense here that could really put a lot of points on the board. I'm excited to see what this team can do this year.
Looking at the verdict for this offense, the Gators have done the correct things in building a unit that can contend at the upper tier of college football. An elite prospect at quarterback with a growing pass-catching group with good talent, a young and deep running back room, and a phenomenal O-line built around size and development that's given them, boatloads of experience. Far from a complete, it's slightly close to a complete unit. The tight end production won't be there, and they don't have that versatility in terms of a pass-catching running back. But again, Nick, an A+ from me. This is as good as it gets, and last year we seen true freshman receivers dominate college football, and I'm expecting Wilson and Brown to get involved. And if they do on a consistent basis, then they certainly are going to be a lock for an A+, I think. A lot of people might question that because of what they might have in terms of face value, in terms of returners at wide receiver. But if those two freshmen get involved like they did in the spring game and like guys did last season across the nation, then this team will certainly be an A+ on this side.
I think this team is very talented, a really good deep wide receiver room, a very deep offense overall. They returned 8 starters. They put up 28.5 points per game last year. They can easily get to 30, 35 points per game. I like a big jump for this offense. I'm excited for this Gators offense. I think they really have a good core here.
Looking at the defensive side of the ball for Florida, it started off abysmal the first couple games of the year. They were bad on this side of the ball, and as the year went on, they got much better. Look against Tennessee, against Georgia, they were very competitive and made some plays. As the year went on against LSU, they were impressive. Ole Miss, they knocked them out of the playoffs with some great playmaking. So things started to finally come around for this defense. They only added 2 guys out of the portal. They also have 3 top 100 recruits arriving. They're leaning on 7 starters that are returning, but they do lose their top 3 tacklers. You look at the edge department, returns a top asset in Tyreek Sapp. He was a legit force. Elite versus the run, made big impact as a pass rusher as well, led the team in TFL and sacks. George Gums was right behind him, but wasn't very effective in the bigger games. Only 1.5 sacks in conference play, but a veteran who did get on the field a great bit. Cameron James, 6'6", 270, is a solid run defender. Kofi Asari comes over from UMass. He was a solid player for them at 6'5", 250. You have LJ McCray. He was a high-ranked 5-star in last year's class. He should really emerge this season as he arrived as a quite raw prospect with length, good motor. Should be lethal with some added strength as he's already at 6'6". The interior D-line returns a veteran in Caleb Banks, 6'6", 325. He's a good run defender, adequate pass rusher. He had 2.5 sacks versus Ole Miss, for example. DeAndre Robinson, a 3-star in last year's recycle, 6'5", 307. Played a solid amount, wasn't all that good for him. Jamari Lyons, he's expected to be big upon his return from injury, 6'3", 304. The Micah Biora, a second-year player. He's a big body at 6'4", 351. The interior D-line's full of unproven players, Nick, but they have plenty of size here. Should have a good rotation across the board. What do you make of this D-line that certainly needs to see some other faces step up? But the return of Tyreek Sapp is big in getting them to be more consistent on a weekly basis.
Tyreek Sapp's a great return. He's a hell of a player that really can step up and be a big force and had a good year last year. 47 total tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, a guy that was all over the place on defense. He's a big physical asset. George Gums has to find a way to be more consistent, but I think the stats were solid. 35 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 5 sacks for him. Caleb Banks was solid for this team. 21 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Good numbers out of him. Cameron James, he's a guy that you want to see a little bit more out of, but a guy that did show some promise last year. 28 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Decent numbers there. I think the ad that you highlighted, Asari from UMass was a really good ad of the portal. A guy from the state of Massachusetts went to UMass, had 11 solo tackles last year, 5.5 tackles for loss, 30 total tackles, 3 sacks, plus a quarterback hurry and a forced fumble. This is a guy that I think can do it all. 6'4", 246. I think he's a really good ad, an underrated player they grabbed out of the portal that could certainly fight for game time early on. This is a defensive line unit that's a good unit. They have to step up, right? This is a unit that has a great breakout player and a star player in Tyreek Sapp, but the rest of the unit around him has to find a way to be consistent, put some pressure. LJ McCray has to step up and be involved. I think James has to find a way to be comfortable in this unit and put some pressure on the quarterback. This is a big unit that can take a huge step forward. It's a wait and see approach for me, but I do like what they have on paper here.
Looking to the middle of the defense, I think linebackers are a pretty glaring need for this football team. They lose Shamar James, which is going to put a lot of more on the plate of these younger players. Grayson Howard was quite solid last year. He has good instincts, allows him to be strong versus the run. Struggles in coverage though. Miles Graham was good in his near 200 snaps, but never really saw him on the field versus tougher competition in his freshman season. 6'1", 230 though, real good downhill backer. Has good athletic ability to make sideline-to-sideline plays. I think he's going to emerge as a star for them. Jaden Robinson was an efficient tackler, but had way too many poor outings overall. Aaron Childs wasn't any good in his reps. They have a 4-star in Ty Jackson, who's expected to make an impact early on. He's a good, powerful tackler, and they can use his instincts and coverage, but he's not the most athletic player. I'm just not the biggest fan of this linebacking room, Nick, and I know I've given a lot of praise to most of the units on this football team, but I think linebacker is one where you can certainly have a lot of adjusted criticisms.
I think they should have gone out and probably grabbed some more players out of the portal at linebacker. I think that was a big miss from with his coaching staff. They probably could have gone out there and got some more physical pieces here. Jaden Robinson's like a good returning player, 52 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. Good numbers there. Miles Graham's had 30 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack during his reps. Aaron Childs, that is, did not look really good during his reps, 22 total tackles and a sack for him. They should have gone out and grabbed the linebacker of the portal. I think that was a miss by this coaching staff. This is a unit that's certainly weak, the weakest on the team, and one I do worry about.
Looking at the secondary, early on, they were terrible. As the season went on, though, they got better. I've always been high on Devin Moore. He's battled health again last season. He was great when he was on the field. Cormani McClaney got on the field late in the year. Was very poor in coverage. Jameer Grimsley was a high-ranked 4-star in last year's class. Should start to see more playing time. They added a JUCO, Michael Caraway. Starters have promise. The backups remain iffy, though. Sharif Denson, Aaron Gates, neither was a standout in the slot, but Denson was a good downhill player maker versus the run. Struggled as a tackler, though. This safety group, I think, is incredible. It's led by a 2-year starter in Jordan Castell. Took a bit of a step backwards last year in coverage, though. Has nice length, showcases good leverage versus the run. Was a much improved tackler, though. Bryce Thornton was really good, had plays on the ball throughout the season. Was a respectable run defender as well. And I think the return to Asa Turner is a monumental one. He's only played 1 game last year. He's a good tackler of great length. He was a star for Washington for a couple of seasons under Kalen DeBoer. Rarely allows big plays in coverage. The run-stopping prowess is evident with him. They'll need to get him on the field in some regard. I wonder if they'll contemplate maybe moving him to slot a little bit. One thing I noticed with the secondary, Nick, is they had way too many busts, especially when blitzes were called. They had poor positioning or overall just didn't understand assignments when they were calling blitzes. And that allowed the free yards and typically free touchdowns for the opponents. That's one area that was very glaring on tape that the staff has to clean up, and I assume that they will.
Certainly a bust-heavy defense that really did show some issues on blitzes last year. Jordan Castell was really solid for this team, 55 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, 9 pass breakups. He's a really good safety. And another fellow strong safety there that's really solid is Bryce Thornton, 41 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 3 picks, 3 pass breakups. Good numbers there. Sharif Denson is really solid against the run, 37 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a pick, and 2 pass breakups. I think those are some solid numbers there. Aaron Gates showed some promise last year, 27 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, a pick, pick and 3 pass breakups for him. Also had 2 fumble recoveries. I think Dylan Johnson's not a bad asset that they returned for this team as well. 27 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss for him. There's some question marks here, but they added some solid players that overall I think Devin Moore could finally get fully healthy and play at left corner throughout the entire season. I think Sharif Denson is just a really good player that could be really solid for this team. The secondary unit I think is a strong enough unit. I think there are some question marks, but overall it's not a terrible unit. They were bad against the pass at times last year, 227.5 yards per game, 83rd in the nation. They got to find a way to be stronger against the pass if they want to have success of being a stronger team in this conference.
And the guy that played the most reps at corner last year, Dejon Johnson, who was a pretty respectable player for them, was arrested last week in Tampa and faces a variety of different charges. So we'll see what happens with that one. He was, again, their top corner in terms of reps played. So there'll be a big loss if he's not able to compete this fall. Look at the verdict for the defense. They really rallied after a poor start to the season, Nick. The D-line has size. The rotation should be a tough group. And I think they'll surge against the run. The linebacking group, though, is questionable. And while the secondary should certainly be better than it was last fall, they'll need to play with more tenacity and, of course, better IQ. And that's going to start with coaching. I'd like to think some of those negatives will be cleaned up. And this group showed potential. They can compete in the SEC, Nick. Again, back half of the year against some very formidable opponents and offenses. They stepped up big. So I'm very hopeful for this group. A B for me, though. But I think they can certainly ascend into that A- category potentially.
I think a B is a fair number right now, or a fair grade for this team right now. This is a unit that 23.1 points per game last year given up is not bad, but the yards per game at 376 was a bit high, certainly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in terms of rush yards per game, yards per game, and pass yards per game. So the points per game was really an outlier a little bit there. They had some stronger games that kind of pulled that number up a little bit, or pulled that number down, I guess, in the positive direction. When you look at that, I think it's a defensive line that has a lot of talented pieces here. A wait-and-see approach to see if they can be elite in the SEC. The linebacking core worries me a lot. I'm questioning that, but I think the secondary, even if Deon Johnson does not play for this team, I still think this is a really good secondary unit that has some great pieces, and I love Bryce Thornton and Jordan Castell. Excited to see what those two safeties can do this year.
Looking at the Florida Gators schedule and the final prediction, not many people trusted the process of Napier, but it's about to come full circle as this is a legitimate team led by a young upstart offense with sky-high potential behind a veteran offensive line. Defensively for the Gators, it's tough to gauge how dynamic they can be, but with the big bodies and skill up front, they should be forceful during the year, but its zone coverage and coaching has me pondering how much improvement is in store for that side of the ball. Again, Nick, 3 years in a row I've correctly predicted this team's record, and if I want to make it 4 in a row, they're going to have to hit 9-3 against a schedule that's just as brutal as it was last year, if not even worse. At LSU versus Texas, sandwiched in between, there's a non-conference date with Miami. That's going to make or break this season, Nick, and that can quickly be 3 straight losses with a trip to Texas A&M looming. You don't want the season to get away from this team because I think they can accomplish a lot, but sometimes the reality sets in that some opponents and, of course, timing can be poor for you. If the Gators want to take that next step, though, you got to put all that to bed, go out there and win football games. This team has a lot in front of them, Nick. I think they beat Georgia this year. I think they'll go on the road and beat Ole Miss as well. I have them losing to LSU and Texas. Those are winnable games, though. Those are 2 teams that are probably locks for the college football playoff, you would imagine. 2 top 10 teams in the preseason as well. So that's a lot of praise. I think they can beat those teams, and if they do, Nick, this team is going to be looking dangerous.
You certainly don't want the season to get away from you with some of those tougher games early on, and you certainly deserve your plaudits for getting this team right 3 years in a row. I'll be the first to congratulate you on that. I don't think anyone had this team getting to 8 wins last year, 7 in the regular season, with that schedule they had. That was a brutal schedule last year. Napier's head seemed to be, ready to be fired right there. His seat was boiling hot, but he cooled it down. And, you and I made multiple videos about this throughout the Napier tenure saying, look, just give the guy some time. Don't run him out of town. Let him bring his guys in. He brought in Lagway. He brought in Ball. He brought in some other pieces here, and he's slowly building something here. Another tough schedule. They're not helping themselves by having to play 2 good ACC teams. Well, 1 good ACC team and 1 team in Florida State in a rivalry game that could potentially be good. Doesn't help you at all. It's certainly not making things easy, and USF is no pushover either. We've seen them give Alabama some trouble in recent years. I think this is a team that will go 8-4, and then they'll lose to Georgia. That's the one game where I differ with you, but I could see them potentially beating Georgia, certainly. I think they'll beat Kentucky on the road. They could beat Ole Miss on the road. That's a really good team, but still I think it's a team that's beatable. You saw Florida beat Ole Miss last year. I think they could beat LSU. Certainly would be tougher. I think it does favor them. That's earlier in the season. Miami, I think they're going to win that game. I feel pretty confident they'll beat the Hurricanes there, although that is a key matchup. They could beat Texas at home. The Swamp is a very tough place to play, one of the best environments in college football. I saw a game there a couple of years ago, and I was blown away with how great it is. My favorite stadium in college football. They could beat Texas on October 4th. I would not put it past them at all, especially if Arch shows any sort of weakness, which could potentially happen considering his inexperience at A&M. That's a tough game as well. They could potentially win that one if you want to find a game somewhere that they could win here of the losses. I think that's probably your best shot overall, because A&M, they're prone to letdowns. They have a lot of preseason hype. They're prone to letdowns. They're probably going to fall to 8-4 like they do most seasons. I like this Florida team a lot. I think Billy Napier is a great coach. I think this team has put together something here. The schedule is certainly more manageable in the second half of the season. They got to get through those tough games in late September and early October. But if they can find a way to come out to the middle of October at 5-1, or even just 4-2, they could put themselves in a great position to make a college football playoff run or make a run at the SEC. This is a very talented roster. They might not be quite able to compete at the highest level, but they're getting closer and closer. Napier is building something. I like the direction this team is going.
You alluded to that game against Texas. When I looked at that, I said this game's 50-50, Nick, and I picked them to lose that game. But again, it's an easily winnable contest for them. And I think at Kentucky's a bit of a trap game. The Wildcats aren't going to be all that great this year, but they are a rival, and going to Lexington can be dangerous for the Gators. I certainly hope that they don't get caught off guard going to that one against a team that should certainly be levels above this fall. It's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. As always, appreciate you joining me breaking down the Gators today. A team that we love paying attention to and we love talking about.
Certainly a fun team to watch. I think Billy Napier is a great coach. I think his team's heading in the right direction. A very fun, ravenous, passionate fan base that cares a lot about their Gators. They got a great team here that's going to put together some great results.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.